Warm welcome also from my side, and as already Edward and Christine introduced this work, we have done, or we in the middle actually, to really collect the data for a bigger survey. And our idea is that we want to work on the issue of product labels to really support or to be an additional approach for this kind of contract-based solutions. And today, the work we have done within this project, of course, is based on many different persons. You can see some of them here, specifically my colleague Christoph Schulze also is involved in this work. However, I would like to start and to bring really the main challenge again on our table, and because that's quite important, why we want to have this kind of focus on this specific value chain approach I want to introduce you to you. You can see here the loss of biodiversity in agricultural landscapes in Europe, and I think it's always quite important. We have in general this loss of biodiversity, and we will not really reach the target also at the EU level from our biodiversity strategy. But specifically in the agricultural landscape, we have a huge challenge, as you can see in both figures. On the one hand, you can see as really comprehensive indicators, the increase of the bird population, and here in red you can see specifically the farmland birds are increased during or decreased during the last years. And on the right side you can see a figure where you can see the loss of so-called high nature value farmland around Europe, and also here I think it's really an urgent issue to improve that kind of situation and to find solutions. If you look at these development on the one hand, and then you look how many actually agri-environmental schemes we already have implemented around Europe, you can see here a figure with all the different countries, and of course we have quite big differences in the implementation of agri-environmental schemes around Europe. However, I would like to really focus on the point that we at the moment really have on more than a quarter of all the EU utilized agriculture areas are under contracts of agri-environmental schemes. And even if we have this implementation, we could not improve the situation. So we really need some kind of change, and we have to think about how we can go forward to improve this situation. One reason I would argue is that we already have quite many of these agri-environmental schemes, but if you look at the specific schemes and at the quality of the schemes, we can see, and here just a small figure as an example from Germany, that the so-called dark green measures, or measures that are very targeted on, for instance, biodiversity or nature conservation, are really, in comparison to other measures, not much implemented. So in this figure you can see only or not at least 1% of the total expenditure of agri-environmental schemes go to this very specific target measures on arable land. A little bit better is the situation on greenland. However, this kind of very target measures need an additional improvement, and that was one of our starting point to think about how we can improve this situation. And we can think about what are the reasons for this less attractiveness of this agri-environmental schemes, this so-called dark green. And I would say it's on the one hand, they are quite often not so attractive for farmers, but also for the programmers, actually, for the administration. And I put some of the reasons on the slide. So in general, of course, these kind of schemes are more, or contracts are more complicated, quite, and ambitious. We really need a real additional effort of farmers. So for many of the other agri-environmental schemes, farmers can sometimes just continue their, for instance, more extensive farmland use. But for these more ambitious measures, they have to change something or to adapt. We need definitely to be target very site-specific measures, and that makes that measures also for the administration quite often not so attractive. Yes? So we need, for instance, sometimes also the consultation or cooperation with nature conservation administrations and things like that. So altogether, if you look at the cost-benefit ratio, this kind of measures are quite good. But if we look at the cost, for instance, for the administration and all that kind of stuff, then they are not so attractive. So I just want to highlight some of the reasons, and based on that, and also why we wanted to develop, beside more or less regional solutions in our different contract innovation labs, we wanted to work on one solution at a kind of bigger scale, or try to give also some or develop some ideas how to change the system more at the European level. So one idea is that we could maybe bundle the capacity of agri-environmental schemes and labor-based approaches. And one idea or how this could look like is that, for instance, we could really try to that farmers participate in a minimum percentage on this biodiversity agri-environmental schemes, or the dark green schemes, we could say, for instance, for 10% of the total farm area are under such kind of contracts. Then we could certificate this farmland within the agri-environmental programming, and we could also organize monitoring, because we have to look if these agri-environmental schemes are proper implemented, but that's already part of these programs. And if we could also, and I think that's really a major issue if you look on this kind of, let's say, biodiversity label, quite often, it's that we need very site-specific solutions, and very diverse approaches around Europe. However, if we combine these with these agri-environmental schemes, we already have this diversity, and within the programs, we have this broad variety of different agri-environmental schemes, ideally adapted on the environmental situation. So that could be one approach, that during the programming of agri-environmental schemes, the experts could pick up what are the really important or valuable schemes, and these would be eligible for certification. That is what drives our research actually, and within these, or if you would implement such kind of approach, we would talk about a governmental label, and we could implement these Europe-wide, but it would be site-specific. I just want to point out that I would say there are some advantages also of governmental label, because in general they are more trusty, and as I introduced, if you could then implement it quite simple in comparison to other approaches. However, this is only one approach, and we will hear today also about a private initiative. Additionally, and I want to explain this on using that figure, we would like to make this kind of label as an additional ones for organic farmers, but also for conventional farmers. So, because also for organic farmers, they want to put it, but it's also if they really implement additional very targeted nature conservation area, it's not really in the organic system quite often. So that's also the basic for this example we will hear more about today from the WWF project. So we would really like that this additional label on nature conservation activities would be or could be used for organic farming and conventional farmers. And within this additional signal of information, we would ideally have a better market situation for that kind of products, and maybe also some additional payments and financial incentives for farmers. So this this bundling of this agri-environmental measures and this label-based approaches, there are potential advantages, and of course there could be higher financial incentives for farmers to implement biodiversity-friendly management or measures, and additionally, or based on that, also a higher acceptance of target biodiversity agri-environmental measures by farmers. And I would say it's also an argument that this kind of label would make the effort of farmers more visible, also for the consumer. Then finally, I think that's also important for all people they are involved in this kind of programming of agri-environmental schemes and how decisions are made there. It's quite important that also the policymaker or the administration would have more, I would say, incentives also to really implement or do more effort to implement this more target measures. However, of course, these are potential advantages, and that's why we have to really make studies if these kind of potential could be really realized. And we approach with different studies, also different target groups. On the one hand, we have this consumer willingness to pay study, use a discrete choice experiment. Then we want to, in the next step, we want to do a study looking at farmers' willingness to accept that kind of combination and also that kind of additional label. And then we also want to make a more qualitative survey of decision maker. Today, I want to focus and give first insights how we conduct this consumer willingness to pay study. And you see here again this map with the contract partners, and we have done in 6 countries a consumer survey, or we are in the middle of this consumer study actually. So in Sweden, in Poland, in Hungary, in Spain, in the Netherlands, and in Germany. In our sample, we have a 3-step data collection for feedback and also adjustments in the experimental design. And we start with a pilot, 400 observations per country. We could finish that kind of pilot study, so 400 observations in each of the 6 countries. In the next wave, we will have 800 observations per countries, and in the second, again, 800. We finished, as I mentioned before, the pilot data collection, and we can or I will present some of the results of this study, or first preliminary results. However, I just want to explain how we go forward to make this this great choice experiment, this willingness to pay study in general. If you do such kind of study, you define different products with different attributes. For instance, or of course, it depends what are your interests regarding these attributes. Also for us, we had to make the choice what kind of products could be important for our question. So for this nature conservation label, and I will explain these in the next slides. However, I just want to start with more detail what really guide our research design. And of course, when we start to think about what could be our attributes, so where should we focus on, we have done before some different research, more or less qualitative, also interview-based analysis with very different stakeholders within the value chain to get more information what could be interesting to look at regarding such kind of labels, the so-called Q analysis. Based on these, we developed our specific research question. However, the main objective of our study is really this first step I explained before, that we wanted to have more insights if there are in general a willingness to pay for that kind of label as starting point, because that's of course the most important thing when we want to go that kind of way. Beside that, we wanted to test if consumer also have particular preferences for so-called result or action-based payments. I don't want to go into detail today on that. It's also interesting, and we will see during when we really collect all the data, the question how do fair producer payments affect consumer purchasing behavior, because at the end we really want to make more concrete policy advice or suggestions how to design this label. And we see based on other studies that these kind of fair producer payments could be quite important. Then we also try to identify and have designed some so-called treatments to look at how important are specific information for the consumer. What does it or how does it affect if consumer get more information on the one hand, but also how much consumers are interested in such additional information. So we designed different so-called information treatments so that we can get results on that. And that's of course important when we introduce, for instance, such kind of labels, and where we can also say the retailer have a quite important responsibility for that. And of course, we are looking at regional differences. You could see we have a quite broad variety of countries in our examples. And to make it more real also for within the choice experiments, we designed such kind of figures where the people then really had or should make the decision between different alternatives. And as you can see here, we have done or conduct this survey for two different products, milk and flour. As attributes based on this research questions I mentioned before, we have one attribute on additional payment to farmers. We have this biodiversity label and organic label, and of course in very different combinations. So some product, for instance, when the consumer have to make the choice, they only the milk has no label. In other choice set, they have both labels, as you can see here. And then one attribute is always the price. Yes, we choose these different attributes for this two products. And maybe one I would like to mention why we choose the milk and flour. We wanted to have two more or less primary, so not products, yeah, pure agricultural products, and we wanted to have them from related to one more related to grassland and one more related to arable land, because as I showed you in this figure, there are really also different, or there's a different need also for grassland and also for arable land to implement or really this nature conservation measurements. And here, just to mention, we introduced these two different labels. We designed these only for the choice experiment here, but people or the products were labeled with one of these nature conservation label when we used the label approach. So now, first primary results, and I would really like to mention that these are only the pilot data, and we really have to go deeper into the data analysis. But just to give you a first clue, the participant in general, and of course that was or is quite important. We can see a significant willingness to pay for nature conservation label, and also as additional label for organic farming products, but then it's a little bit lower. It's quite interesting that in general, or for us, so but we have to analyze these in more detail, that the willingness to pay for organic label is much higher for flour than in comparison to milk. We can see that for flour, the highest willingness to pay we can find for pure organic label, then for practice-based biodiversity label and result-based. But you cannot just simply combine these different labels, of course, so organic plus practice-based. So that's if only one of these labels is on the milk, we can see there's a different willingness to pay, but in general, the consumer are really willing also to pay for this pure nature conservation labels. And that's also true for milk. Here in the pilot data, we see that a little bit less willingness to pay is for organic in comparison to flour. So I don't want to interpret this kind of data today. It's too early actually, but I think it's important to see what kind of output we can at the end produce. As I already mentioned, this is here my third point. We cannot really simply edit the willingness to pay of different labels. So even if I have a combination on one of my choice set, on one of the milk, it's the combination of, for instance, organic and these other label. It's a higher willingness to pay than I would, or than we can observe from a pure organic label, but it's not a simple and additive value. And we can also see some regional differences, but that's really too early at the moment to make or to interpret that data. However, I think we can at the end really provide some interesting information also per country. What could we work there? And in general, I'm as you can imagine, when we developed this idea of this label, for us it was really important also to see this general significant willingness to pay for this label exists. So That's quite good news also, and we hope of course that also the bigger survey or the data will bring us this kind of final results then. And as I mentioned before, of course, first we have to really finalize the data collection and then make a very in-depth and comprehensive data analysis. But it seems to be that we can also go forward and start to think about the other steps based on this preliminary results. So it seems to be one additional option to think about this additional label, so we will go for the next step and prepare also this survey for farmers and then for the policymakers. And finally, we hopefully want to provide a very data-based suggestion how such kind of label could be look like for Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bettina, for this overview and this insight into the background, actually, of our topic today. And since we have a tiny little bit of time, I would like to take some of the questions for your presentation right now. First, there's I want to read a comment from Christian Jochum. He's a member of the Austrian Chamber of Agriculture and says, consumer surveys based on experiments often provide results which cannot be proven in reality. For example, the willingness to pay for animal welfare. That is probably so, but at we have to start somewhere, right, Bettina?
Yes, of course. I mean, we know some of these obstacles, and we try to reduce them within the methods, of course, but we are aware that you cannot translate a willingness to pay directly into really an action at the end. However, we need, and we are part of this ex-ante development, we need, of course, evidence if we can start to go this way. Yes, we don't have any other chance. And I'm very happy that we have today this additional contribution from Lukas Wortmann from the WWF, because they introduce a private initiative, but such kind of label, and there, so we can see experiences in reality if this additional label could work and how it works. Yeah. Yeah. Very or in different framework conditions, yes, but I think we have to try things, otherwise there's no chance to improve.
Yeah, and there's also a very interesting question. I think it's public label and public agri-environmental payments. Is this the only incentive for the farmers, or do you foresee an additional price premium from the consumer side?
Yes, again, I would say we definitely need a broad variety of different approaches. Yeah, so that could be what we introduce is only one, but it's not definitely not the only approach how we can go forward. So I think we really to improve and to really have this what we call transformation in agriculture, I would say we need very different approaches, and I really prefer to just try different things. Yeah, also at a smaller level, and then we will go step by step, and hopefully try to. With these kind of pioneers, we can also find at the end solution for a broader scale. Yeah. So that's how, from my side, it could look like to foster or to support this kind of transformation.
Then maybe a very short answer. What is your educated guess why the willingness to pay seems higher for flour than for milk?
I don't know. We really discussed, so these data are very new. Yeah, my colleague Christoph is in there, and to be honest, yesterday night he looked at the regional differences. So we just need some time, and we also, of course, collect additional data within such a huge study. Yeah, so we see how many flour they buy each week and things like that. So we have to interpret these carefully, and we will do these, but I would not like to do it today.
I understand. There's a question regarding the different information treatments in your experiments. Is there a positive and a negative information given to the responder?
Positive or negative respondent. So in our data, we didn't analyze the influence of the information treatments at the moment. But it was not so, I don't know if I understood the question right. So we give additional information, for instance, how important are biodiversity, or how urgent is the need to change things, or we give more information, more detailed information about the difference between result-based and action-based. And the consumer could really click on if they want to have this additional information. So we will see on the one hand, if they are interested in this information, yeah, and how important the information was at the end for the final decision.
Then one more question: how important is the design of the label? I am asking because of yellow and orange for dark green measures. Interesting question.
Of course, it was also, I mean, we couldn't put so much, so we couldn't really design a high level label. Yeah, so for this study, I would say it could be improved, and in general, it could be quite important, but we didn't test different labels, yeah, within the study. So, and what, or if these the design will have an effect. Yeah,
you can have all. You have to compromise on something. So one more question, maybe. Can you say how much more they are willing to pay? I mean, what's the margin?
Yes, of course, we can say that at the moment. I don't want to present the figures today, but yes, we will say that if we analyze these carefully, and we will also compare these and with maybe, or that's an idea, if you have some real life data, and I would also, for instance, like to really look at the example of the ongoing WWF project. Yeah, so if we can see maybe for Germany some relations, if we are on the right track, also regarding the really level of additional payments. And of course, we have to do carefully the analysis and yeah, interpret the data then. But we will deliver.
So stay tuned. It's coming on our channels. Exactly. So yeah, there's a very specific question regarding agroforestry. If you see room for agroforestry in the framework, or a way to indicate that the product comes from an agroforestry system, is that factor?
Just, I can only answer this maybe by if these could play in be part of this dark green measures, yeah, in the specific countries. That's why I really try to emphasize the importance within this approach that we can have a broad variety, yeah, of different measures. The main objective should be that we have a clear biodiversity goal for these different measures, and of course we need quite of criteria how to pick up these measures. But yeah, as we also all the programmers of this agri-environmental schemes at the moment have more pressure to really define objectives and make a clear link to different environmental objectives, I would say they have this, or they have to deliver anyway this kind of information. So it should be easier now really to also collect the right data.
Yes, there are two more questions. One is very specific from Johanna Vida from the Blé. Could you explain how the different labels, action-based, results-based, and organic, were explained to the buyers, consumers?
No, not at the moment. We have to look at these.
Okay. And the last one
yeah.
for now, do you see any possibility to integrate the biodiversity label into a larger label on sustainable foods at a later stage to avoid maybe the label forests on products?
Yeah, I mean, I would say how it is, or how we try to think about the label at the moment. It could be a general part, yeah. It could be the puzzle of the nature conservation point on a bigger label or something like this. As it is developed so generic, yeah, and so we can really have this huge variety of different approaches behind. Yes, I would say in general, yes.